Hello. It was a false start. Whoa, what's with the contrast? How dare you, phone? Okay, clearly the contrast isn't working today. Let's see. Now you can see no more contrast. Let's see where I haven't prepared anything whatsoever. Hej chillstrumpan, chillstrand. En bra. How's it going? So let's see what you actually want. Bjorn is in the dark, yeah, exactly. Ninja mode. Hey Ixie. How's it going? How's it going? How's it going? Yeah. So let's see if I should draw something for half an hour and then do the 2-week challenge. Paint over. Or just start. That's just the question. I don't know. Actually, let's do half an hour. Half an hour random photo bashing type stuff. Okay. Let's do 30 minutes of something. Just gonna find a good picture as a base. Alright, let's do it that one. Oh yeah. Hefes bro, no, I'm not really tired. Just kids are in bed. Don't want to be screaming. You know how it is. Hey Atsuki, hey Ons. So this isn't really photo bashing. This is going to be something kind of like photo bashing, but not. Right. So let's say I have till 32. Okay. Just gonna be like messing around a bit. See what comes out. It's not gonna be really photo bashing. It's gonna be just using photos as a base to explore a concept. So it's not going to be anything like super photo bashing. It's just going to be photo sourced concept kind of. Paint over bashing. Yeah. Exactly, something like that. So that arm gonna have to go. So how was everyone's weekend? Mine weekend was pretty nice and relaxing actually. I let's see, went to the massive park with my son. He went with a scooter in like this massive skate park, and he was kind of driving around there, having fun. Um, I went clothes shopping. I do that like once a year, maybe. Just go and buy everything I need for a year, and now I'm all set. I bought like 2 pair of pants, 4 shirts, 2 t-shirts, 2 hoodies, um, yeah, I don't know, bunch of clothes. Just that sounds amazing. Destiny 2 on PC, yeah, I think unfortunately Destiny 2 on PC is not going to be a huge user base. And I think a lot of people not going to choose PC version. So what I think is going to happen with the PC base is that it's going to be a short-lived thing, not a lot of players. Because I think Destiny has been so long on console. It's like it's bread and butter, right? I don't think a lot of people know it's for PC, or why buy it on PC, That's what I think. It's Elin. Good morning. Good morning. It's so engraved in my lines. Good morning. Good evening. You think most people will move to PC? Good morning. I mean, I played Destiny 1 a lot, and I was contemplating buying PC, but in the end decided that it's too risky. I don't think. I honestly think it's going to be short-lived. They're going to keep pushing it. They're going to still try to get people on it, but I think majority of all people will be on console. The biggest user base will be console, for sure. Going to be a hardcore group on PC, like always. But I don't think, as Destiny is, I don't think it will ever rival like PUBG, um, Battlefield games, which is like these PC monsters, right? If you think about how Destiny plays, it's not very PC uh, orientated in that sense. It's very console-like setup because it's been on console for so many years now that I don't know. like you say, we'll see. But I doubt it. I doubt there will be a huge user base. I think it's gonna be too tricky. Hey, Jacob Mobley. Good morning for you. Ixie, I think they don't cross-platform play. Hey, Larib. You made it. So while I'm waiting for people to join, I'm just kind of doing some random half-hour kind of photo bash type stuff. But it's not really photo bash, it's photo overpaint. Just using a photo as a base. I had quite an interesting hamburger today, actually. It was sheep. Sheep with like Greek style tzatziki hamburger. It's quite tasty actually. On like dark, not dark, but on rye bread. I thought I'd try something new, and I got it, and it was so much smaller than the other hamburgers. I was like, oh, I feel cheated. But because it was rye bread and stuff like that, it was very heavy, and that size was really, you know, good enough. It was like, it looked like a small cheeseburger size, but it was very tasty. I was surprised. There is this hamburger place here. That's quite. There's one guy who wanted to make a hamburger place that's like higher end fast food. He called it slow food or something like that. So it's still hamburgers and stuff, but they take a little bit extra time to make it, which makes the food very tasty. Battle Chasers. I think my friends work on that game actually. Let me quickly Google Battle Chasers. No, my friend's not working on it per se. But a friend of mine who went to the same university did the splash art or the box cover for it. This painting. Not that one. This one. What's his name? Oh, you should see it, right? Yeah, you see it. It's what's his name? Johannes Helgesson painted it. His style is really nice, actually. He always liked that kind of style, and he's always been pushing it. and he's gotten really good over the years. Lots of hard work. So I'm glad that it's paying off for him now. And a very polite and proper guy. A really, really nice guy. Yeah, Helgeson. He went a year underneath me in university, I think, or 1 or 2 years. Me and him always sketched and talked, and he was equally driven, or maybe I was a little bit more. But I was a special kind of student, for good and bad. But he was equally. We always talked concept art, and he was always very, into his style, this stylized style. Did all sorts of studies from Glenn Vilppu and to learn proper anatomy and all these things. He was a cool guy, or was. I don't know him anymore. Yeah, he's also working with Joe Mad's lines. Yeah, he's a good. His style, personal style, sits very close to that Battle Chaser style. Let's see if I can find some. Here's a quick Google. As you can see, it's very stylized and sits in that same space, Yeah, so his personal style, he's been chasing that. Not, I wouldn't say Joe Bad style, but definitely in the stylized category. So 15 minutes in on my completely random photo paint over concept exploration. Oh man, whiskey is tasty. See, a lot of you guys put a lot of effort into the 2-week challenge this year. Oh, what's with me today? These 2 weeks. Saying good morning. I don't know what's happening. Probably, like someone mentioned, tired. I'm not really tired though, but I'm definitely laid back this evening. Been a long day. And usually I stream in the morning, so you get a different version of me in these like extra streams. I'm always, kicking my feet up, as they say. I don't know what this is gonna end up looking like. Let's give him a visor. Oh, Jacob Mobley, the Battle Chaser ones? I haven't seen that one. Yeah, Alms as usual, puts tons of effort in. Always fun to see, and it evolved quite nicely as well. I'm super keen on the way this all feels like just a big massive diaper. I should have taken a left somewhere. Instead I took a right, and now it's a sci-fi diaper. Well, let's try to change it, I guess. One thing that I really like about Alms is Alms' choice of colors. They're always something you wouldn't uh, assume, you know, very surprising. All right, I will have a look. Inspiration. Before or how long back? Sofa Stranglers, Post Spree, Angry Sausage. No. Oh, it was ways back. All right. Well, I don't want to sit and scroll, but yeah. It's really, I think I really like that style. It's fun to watch or to look at, you know. Also fun to paint in that style as well. Like very expressive shapes and all these. I always find doing these photo paintovers so interesting to do. You can get so many different results based on just random design decisions that you make, you know, and you just roll with it and see what comes out. It's always an interesting outcome. Hey, Captain Bose. Yeah, I know the feeling. I absolutely get your point that you want your colors different, and they are. There's one guy, I don't know if you've seen him, but his style was at least like chose very crazy colors. If you search Robogabo, um, you know the colors he chooses are not conventional. You know, like very much like you, Ohms, very different color choices. He's like a huge fan of color theory and so on. That might be someone that you could be inspired by, or at least see a fellow crazy color person. I think Robogabo works for three. Yeah, he works on Halo. He works for that company, Bungie, I guess. I don't know if he works there anymore. But he has very different color theory. Robogabo, yeah, he does really good art. He used to be a part of the same secret art site that me, Gaxix, and a bunch of other artists were a part of. I think. I think Robogabo was a part of that. Or I was maybe buddy with him on concept art. I know I was friends with him on conceptart.org. But I have a vague memory of him being at that Gorilla Art Fair as well. I might be wrong. FS Bro, yeah, for sure. It wasn't really a secret art group, but it was a secret forum. And there was a public blog that everyone posted on. It was quite big for some time, many years ago. But we had a secret forum, like where everyone hung out and complained and talked. I think we were maybe 20, 30 artists. I think Carla Ortiz was there. I think Yana. No, not Yana. Some guy called Federico. And there was a bunch of people. Khan Muftish. Kim Jung. Johan Chapes or something. What, I don't remember his name. A lot of people there. It was really fun. You know, we all talked to each other, talked shit about whatever experiences you had. So quite a tight knitted group. Nick Klein as well came to mind now. He was also there. He's a cartoon, graphic novel guy, I think. Does a lot of cover art and stuff like that for comics. Hey, Pixel Youth. Maybe 1-2 hours. I will do a paintover session for a 2-week challenge. And After that, I'll end the stream. Hey, new pathogen. Spatsiba. Delilah. I don't know. Okay. Delilah Dishonored. This? Then it's Maya Hansen. Or these? I think this is one of those Russian guys. What's his name? Horrible the name. Um, Paintings she made. I don't know. Hey, Belenir. So here's my quick half an hour photo source concept. From what was it? Not even. I think it's 25 minutes of just randomness. And let's see the original. Hey, English Bobby. Sci-fi soldier, English Bobby. Yeah. I love doing these stupid little random concepts. How dare you, phone? Sci-fi soldier number 576. Check. Okay, let's challenge. It was. Oh no, it's not challenge number 16. It's challenge number 17, right? Yeah, 17. Boop, 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 extra string, there we go. 17. I'm gonna make a folder where I save the paintovers. And now dig out the 2-week challenge. Oh yeah, I can show them as well. This is Chillstrand, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. And then Ixies. Oh. Ixie. Here's Chilistrumpan. I can actually show here. Hefes. Pretty nice. Schoolism trial is this file name. Interesting. Yeah, there we go. Sergei Kolesov. Kolesov, not Coleslaw. Colossal. Hilarious. This is Sayard, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, schoolism adverts. Yeah, all they're cool guys for sure. Schoolism for president. So who did this one? No, who did this one? York. York. Platypus. Here's Ohms. Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. I love Ohms colors. They are crazy. Some good feedback from all the community members. Here's Furs. It's not finished. ASD. How many files doesn't exist called ASD? I think I will take that off screen, as one picture wasn't supposed to be shown because the artist wanted it to keep it not in public. Oh yeah, here's my entry. I participated. Boom, my wife. Let's see if there's any more paintings I should do paint overs on. No, no, no. No, no, no. Alms worked hard, but I'd say Jacob Mobley took the prize this 2 weeks. He grinded that painting. Ended up great. Right, that's it. That's all the paintings. Right. Yeah, but Jacob Mobley, he chose not to put his painting in for paint over. So, were these all? I think so. Okay. Let's start with Fur. Hey, Gyurk, how's it going? So this is Fur's painting. I think Fur didn't finish. But overall, exactly, Narib. You should have been on Discord to see Jacob Mobley's great painting he chose to keep for himself. So compositionally, the picture is very hard to read. Like if we do a squint test or zoom out, it's the same thing kind of. There's very high contrast and there's a lot of his first out. Oof. It's very hard to look around, right? And also the perspective is quite odd. Like we see the human, which is small. We see the robot taking a knee, which is huge. But then the point of view of us looking at it is quite high up, right? So a high point of view, like bird's perspective, looking down, makes everything small and even the woman smaller. Uh, so I think the idea is cool, but I think the composition or the choices being made, I wouldn't do it this way. Like I would probably like have their robot um, like framed differently. Like the girl probably like standing, touching the robot's head, and maybe he's like tilting the head like a cat, letting the girl um, like standing on his arm and the leg like that, and some third point perspective, so that we can see the trees. Uh, so he becomes huge while the girl becomes small. That I would rather do that, something like that, instead of seeing everything zoomed out. And that's a typical like production art problem. Is that when you're making an illustration, like you want it to be engaging and not showing the whole concept. So if you do have the full shot, you should really consider like why are you showing it the way you're doing. Um, might be a bit hard to read, but anyways. So I think compositionally I would have not done it this way, like you did. But if you go the standard 2 week challenge approach of paintovers, where I try to save what you've done, um, I would try to crop it so that the narrative becomes tighter or more personal, and then try to direct um, the eye more and have the light. I can see the point of view that you've made with the light source coming in and kind of helping, kind of cascading um, shapes. I would enhance that further. One thing though, also, I see that you added blue in the shadow, which is great. But I think it needs to be more, needs to be stronger. Uh, but also, one thing to consider is the global, the bounce light of all the light. And the light is quite intense. It goes high and the shadow goes low, which indicates high intensity in the light. If the shadows are really dark and the light is very hard, you know. But that also means bounce light. So you could there's this overarching just flatness in the painting, where all the shadows, regardless of more or less where they are in kind of 3D world, they just all go dark. And one thing that your paintings could use more of is the whole painting the atmosphere aspect of it. Someone that does that really well is Jamie Jones, for example. He paints in the atmosphere with color, temperature, and comprehensive light. Also, the perspective is a bit odd on the cast shadow, where the light is coming from. The light is coming from, like it's being thrown from up here, kind of down towards the side. Then the shadow should go more over here, then fall backwards. Hey, Sayert. So a lot of the one thing also I would change is the way you've done the trees. It's just very generic. Like here are trees. You've lost an opportunity to show personality or character or setting. You know, is it a happy meadow? Is it a scary jungle? Is it a spooky forest? You know, what kind of forest is there? And I think you should making decisions. You should try to think more about those kind of things of what's the story, what's the point of the painting, uh, what tools can you use to convey that initial thought of, oh, it should be a beautiful meeting in the forest. Is it romance or is it friendship? You know, then you can say, you know, make decisions of, okay, can you enhance the sense of friendship by making a scary forest, for example. Oh yeah, he finally found her in the forest, and then you can set up everything accordingly. So the forest should feel scary. She should be, you know, maybe she's thrown her like a basket, Red Riding Hood style, you know, with the content thrown on the floor or the forest bed. You know, she's been running and jumping up, and you know, there's all these layers you can add to it, and by just I think you just went too safe. You need to learn to build up the scenario, build up the composition to enhance whatever scenario you want to like go after, and think of it like a puzzle. Which pieces can you put in to make the whole scene make more sense? You know, as a thing that you want to communicate. But yeah, the crop is different. Um, so here's the original. Could flip it. So here's my slightly tighter crop. Just me kind of painting up the light a little bit more, trying to make a little bit more clearer rhythm. like I said, it's more like trying to say what's there while giving you pointers of where to take it yourself. You know, I could easily sit here and give you a full paint over, but it defeats the purpose, I think. So usually what I do is just kind of push you in the right direction, and then it's up to you to either do the changes or think about them or ignore them. There's more layers to it, of course. So if you do have any questions uh, afterwards or now, you know. But it's a good painting. I like the design of the robot. It's just too, the lighting is just too stacked, like on and off, too hard. There's no overly clear reading of the painting. But it's a good start. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, the posing for sure. Uh, like I mentioned, what's the point of the narrative? Like, why are they meeting in the forest? And that can, you know, that's one of my paintovers, or the redoing of the painting would be a completely different camera angle, posing and so on. You know, because it's the whole story. You know, a piece of concept art that they can just stand should indicate, you know, character and all these things, but it's less important the actual design in theory. You know, it's more of the narrative. So here's Georg's. I think super lush colors, really fun. Um, there's there's certain things happening in this painting which ruins the the mood of it, and it's the fact it's a complicated issue, but I'll try to explain it. Um, the creature we're seeing in a very advanced kind of use of camera, right? Let me sketch it up. That school teacher red comes out, right? So we're looking at the way the curvature kind of works, right? We see the whole thing kind of bending in perspective. Um, hey, Helix. Uh, then what happened is a straight horizon, and then everything we see kind of from the side, very vertical. And a problem with that, what happens is that it chunks the painting up in two sections. So it becomes the dynamic part and then the stiff part, like the part with the boy or girl uh, sitting there in the sling is like very organized, very horizontal, very like safe in that sense. Uh, and what further kind of ruins the flow and the fantastically painted surroundings and the creature is that the creature itself is kind of silhouetting the environment, creating like tangents. And there was this one guy, you know him as Keikai Kotaki, right? The Guild Wars concept artist guy. And he said something very funny at one of the workshops, like it's a bit funny, like the I'm gonna choose different words that he used, but things shouldn't be afraid of each other, right? They should touch each other. Uh, he did an analogy of a boy and a girl, having sex, that they shouldn't like almost touch, right? They should touch or overlap. Uh, and in this painting where there is overlapping occurring, like over there and at the cloud, and it becomes so much more interesting, right? It becomes a lot more complex. It becomes a lot more engaging to observe, and over here as well, right? We see this overlap and this, and we become engaged. We can see the relationship in depth. We can see the kind of behavior more. So one of the things I would change to start with is not have such a balanced horizon line. I would try to add way more motion. And also the motion of the platypus. Oops, now I have a red ring up there. Anyways, it has a great motion, right? But the tail is just static up. So I would try to think about, okay, what's the direction the tail is going? Why is it moving that way? Is it taking a turn? All these things. So now, ideally, the platypus will have more motion. So he's kind of swooping around, looking up, and one thing with it almost touching the island, I would probably make it overlap the island more at some point, or give it more space, and not in a similar shape of the actual platypus beak or whatever it is. So change it up a little bit more, and maybe have it overlap down here, so that we get that relationship of depth. Because it's important to get a relationship between all the shapes. If we all always only see in one direction, like without overlap, it's going to be hard to figure out where in space, in 3D space, it is. And another thing which I think could have been better is the way you've chosen to put elements in the foreground. I get the reasoning, But I also think the placement is a little bit unfortunate, because it looks like the boy will smash into the rocks. Then it's not a beautiful interaction. It's quite that eye of the platypus becomes a completely different meaning. So by opening it up, the boy will now have a safe journey. And the trees and so on, I think they have way too much darkness. It needs to be a lot more less dark. That grin, the grin becomes completely different. And of course, Sayart enjoys that. So now the boy has fun. You could even, have him splash further and show the path of the boy as well. Like he's like created a wake. We can clearly see that they're having fun together, right? And usually when you're happy, you don't clench the teeth together. You open the mouth when you're happy. And another thing, the perspective of the eye, I think, you could use an overlap going in the opposite direction, an overlapping shape, to kind of indicate like he's happy and smiling. And squinting a little bit more, rather than just kind of staring him murderously. Yeah, so one thing which is very important when you're doing stylized stuff like this is to focus on shapes. Like you can have some fun shapes in the background, all the cliffs, etc. They should be crafted in a way where there's a clear character, there's clear weight, clear behavior of the mountaintops, etc. If we look at my spelling. For example, a thing that came to mind was Pixar and the movie Cars, right? How they made the rocks in that first movie. This, of course, is taken to an extreme, but you can, if I can only find a good example. This is not a good example. Maybe here in the background. You see that they're obviously Cadillac cars, right? That acts like a mountain range. But what I'm trying to do, here's a hood of a car, etc., is that the shapes are clean and readable and fun, right? So so what's important is that you think about the shapes that you have here, not make them into objects, but think of them as objects. You know, like, is it a pointy, dangerous rock? Is it a happy rock? Is it, you know, is it a balancing rock? Maybe that makes everything fun. Uh, you know, it gives a completely different impression of the painting if everything has a fun, thought of shape or a reasoning behind the existence of it in the painting, other than just add stuff for the sake of adding, right? So a lot of things should have a reason to be there. I should have a tendency. There should be a tendency to having to explain it with shape, shape in a form language that is consistent throughout the painting. So if this platypus has a fun shape, everything should be considered to the same degree. You know, why is it the way it is, etc., etc. I hope it makes sense. And let's do a quick liquefy. My best friend and I. And also a funny thing about placement is like, where do we place this platypus? Ahead? Slightly ahead? Maybe he's cropping? You know, quicker? Or is he like above the, you know, it creates here, it's almost, there's no dynamics, right? They're very close to each other. There's no pull in what he does, really. You know, so I think it would be wise to probably move him forward a bit. So there's a more of an interesting relationship between the boy and the platypus that is becomes speed, you know. Here's quite, there's no tension in there. Now there's more swoosh. So what is a happy rock? Yeah. Yeah, so that's the things I would say, the biggest things holding it back. Colors is also very beautiful, very fun. Like I said, too much black in the environment. Uh, Way more environmental, like perspective fogging and so on. But overall, I'd say very, very fun and beautiful painting. Tidra, yeah. I usually don't click URLs, but this time I did. So here's your version, Georg. And here's some of the just the placement changes and playing with the horizon line and making it a little bit more swooshy. But I think now that I moved it forward, I think it has to overlap the environment. and as I copy pasted it as well, as it kind of cuts into the environment. But yeah. Here's just everything is so balanced. There's no tension. Here's way more, I think, way more movement. Yeah, this Georg's painting. Hey, Wallasaurus. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, apparently. Good evening. Yeah, the top cloud there is needs to be removed. Tinder, yes, every 2 weeks. Everyone that contributes to the 2 week challenge. After this stream, I will set a new 2 week challenge. And after 2 weeks, I do paint overs for all entries. So that was Georg's. Some food for thought, I hope. Let's see. Sayarts. Good night, Tindre. So here's Sayarts. So just to clarify, this 2 weeks topic was something beautiful. That was the topic. Make something beautiful. So this is Sayarts. I think, first of all, it should be cropped this way or flipped this way. In this way, all the lines lead to over here. When it's flipped, we land on the character. So now the lines go to him. Yeah. Little did he know that the guy has fashioned a bird out of body parts and painted it blue. So a lot of times you can get different compositional effects by having something left to right, like Hafez says. Westerns read left to right, and that's how we read books, and that's how we read images. So that you can use it in different ways. So having it, reading it like this from left to right, yes, indeed, we land on the character, but because the line continues, we travel out of the picture and we look over here instead. So it's something to keep in mind. If you do have the important part on the left, you have to create the image to enhance that, rather than drifting lines that goes out of it. So something beautiful. I think this is beautiful. It's a calm, quiet moment. There's certain aspects which I think ruins the image. So let's go. Let's go. So first, the biggest issue I have is that there's a line going like that, line going like that, line going like that, and line going like that. It creates a very uninteresting composition. For example, one way to remedy that would be like I talked about on Georg's, is overlapping shapes. Like they shouldn't be scared of overlapping and touching, you know. if they're all separated and never overlapping, this just becomes too much tension in that air for it to be a good painting. Right? You need calm, you need action. But if everything is almost not touching constantly, it becomes this awkwardness. So that being said, we're changing the composition a little bit. We can also think about lighting, right? What it looks like, kind of, is the lighting is coming from above, right? Daylight. We could there is a cast shadow there, but what I think a big problem with this painting is the lack of like volume. That there's a lot of um, light at places where there shouldn't be light. You know, because of the light source, um, the light becomes very it becomes very flat. Same goes for the bird, and the bird could throw a shadow on the hand and so on. But then also the what I think is another problem is there is some color variation on your arms and jacket and so on, but the problem is that it feels very almost like there's no material behavior. Um, and there's the same range in gradient or valley range, like the cutoff of the valley range is the same, like it says full range. You know, you try to make the metal shinier, but it's behaving in the wrong way. For metal, for example, you need a lot harder range in the gradient, and cloth, etc., which is a very soft fabric, has a more fuller range of values across the volume, because it's not reflective, it's not a hard surface, it's a soft surface which absorbs a lot of light. And because he has a one shoulder up, there has to be a tension in the fabric if he leans up on it, because you're kind of indicating that with the shoulders. So it's a bit confusing the way you've chosen to show the folds versus the posture. So you gotta make sure to rotate the torso correctly, and then also light it so that it makes sense, and have tension in the fabric. Because in your version, I think it was too smooth and curve-like. Yeah, so the lighting, I would remove this tree. It's not helping the narrative at all. It's just ruining the narrative by having a strong vertical line at the edge of the canvas, and the edge of the tree is kind of almost touching the edge of the canvas, which is a huge, more or less no-no. You can't have things just at the edge of the canvas and running parallel. It ruins the painting. Um, Another thing is the trees in the background. They feel very basic in a way, where how the lack of branches, um, just a straight stem. There's no character in the trees, but why are they also perfectly vertical? Uh, you know, is there maybe any combination of trees in the background which you can add to help sell the idea of him sitting in a forest? And why is everything so dark underneath? It feels very scary. That dark crown of the forest. How dare you, phone? Yeah, so it becomes this strange wall of darkness there. And like I mentioned to Fur, is the way the light um, just becomes so contrasty and doesn't sit as a whole together. So if the light comes in, bounces on grass, etc., uh, it's gonna have to bounce up on objects. Uh, Things are gonna bounce light off each other. So the more you pay attention to bounce light and so on, the more alive your painting is going to be, and less symbolic they are going to act, right? Because the problem is you want the person to observe the painting and understand the painting, right? But you can't make it so simple that it's looking at the iconography, symbols for things. uh, you want it to, as you're doing an illustration, a complex scene where there's a character sitting and interacting with a bird, uh, it becomes a story, right? And the more you simplify that story by using symbols instead of the actual setting, which the decisions you're making is with the more realistic light and so on and so on, you really got to pay attention to all of that, and you'll see that the paintings will be a lot stronger. And that's the risk of using reference all the time, and in using them too too close to the reference without having to question what you're painting or looking at. If you're just kind of copying, I'm not saying you are, but I'm just saying in general that there's this tendency of not free thinking in the way how things should sit in the world. Because if you don't have any ref, all of a sudden you have to use knowledge, and you haven't used knowledge because a lot of people just copy reference. The best is to understand the reference and apply it than with knowledge to your own work. Right, Jacob. Good luck and good effort this 2 weeks. Unfortunately, you won't have a paint over, but it was still good. Right, so all I'm doing now is just kind of adjusting the focal point. This pyramid mountain in the background doesn't help anything at all with the narrative. It might as not be there. Um, the focus should be on him and the bird, right? So you can focus the light a little bit more. Maybe, have some highlights on the sword. I think palette-wise, it's pretty okay. It's a little bit washed out. It's a little bit. It lacks a little bit of punch, and I think a lot of that could come from kind of the simplicity of the colors. Um, if you think about how if you shine light on your fingers and you see the light bounce between the fingers and there's a gain in intensity of your color of the skin being hit by light. Um, so by having more variety and real world behavior of skin tone, etc., it just becomes a lot more easier to believe because we are programmed to know these things, even though we don't be able to consciously recall that information. A lot of it comes from, let's say, looking at a robot which tries to be a human, and it becomes this is called uncanny valley, where something is supposed to be alive, but it's not really alive because there's something is missing in there, and it just becomes weird to look at, right? You don't know what it is, but it just feels off, like you should kill it with fire. So it's the same thing when doing, let's say you make a green skin. There isn't green skinned people, but we can easily understand what that should look like as a symbol or as a real world thing. And the real world thing is harder to grasp, and not everyone is going to be able to explain it, what that should look like. But humans are quite good at seeing when something is not right, and then it just becomes off. Something is off with this character. Something is off with this painting. Dark Crystal puppets. It's a little bit like that. They were missing something, but they don't try to be real, as in real people. They were still imaginary, trolls, or whatever. So by just trying to focus the scenario a little bit more, and then more cohesive light, and playing with the composition a little bit, you should start kind of getting a more interesting painting. But you should also consider like the intimacy of the scene. Maybe there's a foreground object, leaves, or who knows. But there's ways the ways there are ways to make it more interesting. And the color palette, like I mentioned, is a bit washed out. I would probably boost it a little bit, make it a little bit warmer. And then of course all the changes, just keep pushing them and move them to more, you know, and be careful of tangents and all the good things I've been talking about on the previous two challenges. But it's a good start, good direction. Okay. Next person. Chilistrumpan. Okay. I think the idea is good. It's something beautiful, I guess, space exploration, massive space, exploring that. I think all in all, it's pretty okay. By the way, one good thing to do when it comes to colors and boosting colors is in focal points or where the light is intense, you can go in and boost the saturation, like at the edges where at the fall off, you know, where the edge turns. And then zoom out and it becomes more vivid, more complex, you know. So for Chilistrumpan, I think it's a good start. The problem I see is if you do a squint test or zoom out, we see the relationship, right, between the rocks and the spaceship. But the problem is that they're all equal intensity and strength, and more or less the same width in the rim light. And what that does is that it puts everything in one depth. Studying colors, do plein air and read color theory from what's his name, Gurney. Do observational paintings, try to break down the palette, how light works, etc., spectrum and all these things. Anyway, so you got to think about what the relationship is between each other. So let's see if I can find an image. Nope. Nope, nope, nope. Nope. Yeah, Andrew Loomis had a illustration book, I think. Anyway, so my point being is that this is a good start of the painting, but you gotta start thinking about it more in 3D space, right? So if this would be a frame of a movie, right? Think of it like that. So we hit the pause in the movie. Do you think the director would choose to shoot this scene in this way to tell this story? Uh, would it be the best choice to find a beautiful space rock, or think of it like in Guardians of the Galaxy? You know, what intensities is there in the scenes? How is it explained? Let's see. In this scene, for example, you know, the interaction lies in him standing alone with rim light and this massive depth with moving ships coming forward, right? If when they flipped in another scene, you know, he is the focus, the background becomes addition to that interaction, right? uh, and in this gif, the reason why it's shot so dead on is because of the interaction between them, right? And the scene is like this, right? So it becomes the 3D, or the depth comes with the guy falling in front, overlapping, and then the guy overlapping the second group, while the second group is overlapping the background, and so are they. Um, so that becomes an interesting, you know, way of showing the interaction between what's happening, right? Um, Same here. Uh, this shot, right? They're all hovering in front of the city. They become the layer of the city, right? They are literally on top of the city, protecting, even though they're nowhere close to each other in a 3D space. They are still there for the narrative, right? So so in this one, what's important is like what is their narrative, right? So they are finding tractor beam, picking these beautiful asteroids, right? Space is beautiful. Um, then you could start thinking about, okay, so this rock in the foreground uh, is closer to us, right? So you could start adding a lot more details in it so that we know what it is. If you keep the contrast low, the details low contrast, it's not going to steal too much attention. You know, maybe even, you know, even there's an interaction between these two, but it doesn't really matter. Second one, rock here. You know, I know there is an perspective fogging in space, but you gotta try to come up with ways to show that. But I mean, there is light in space. There's glaring, you know, because if we choose to look through a lens, we can have light glares, right? Lens flares, etc. Uh, One thing you should pay attention to, maybe there is the way you show interaction between these space chunks, right? Maybe this one gets a cast shadow from the spaceship, and all of a suddenly now you're starting to get a lot more relationship between the objects in the scene rather than having them separated from each other and not interacting in space. You know, maybe this rock here, maybe there's another one. Or whatever. I mean, it doesn't need to be that close. It's gonna cramp the spaceship. But maybe you have some space rock over here. But then it's also very important with the rim light and making sure, like I said to the others, be having consistent lighting. The more you cheat, the more it's gonna be visible that something is off. A lot of the paintings which go, is really impressive is whenever all the components are put together correctly and in a technically good way, right? So it's very important that there is a checklist that you go through. Is the light correct? Is the forms correct? Is the relationship between the objects in the composition correct? Color theory, light, bounce light, should there be a shadow somewhere? All these things, you know. So even though there isn't perspective fogging, you should still try to vary the depth a little bit more with like bleeding light. So focal points obviously needs to be a focal point, so you could potentially help the composition by having a diagonal in the painting more obvious. Maybe there's a shadow being cast on that one as well. Having some swooshy line in space dust, or making it look like a pulsating wave, or whatever you can come up with that helps sell the idea of space, right? And a lot of things also feel like a palette-wise a good start, but it needs to have accents, it needs to have a little bit more vibrancy at places. It needs a lot more, what's it called? Material behavior. Shiny metal, dull rocks, whatever you need to do for the painting to make sense. But it's very important that you think about all these things as you're painting, because the more you think about it, the more it's going to be visible as a cohesive painting. Maybe the narrative speaks that they're looking for that one special rock, and maybe there's more than one floating about, and that way you could justify having all these rim lights or rocks about, is that they're looking for this one in particular. And you could help set up the scene that way by giving the rocks highlights and so on that pushes the eye down towards the focal point. Hello, Rib. Have a good one. My tattoo is in a stage now where it itches. And when it comes to the design of the ship, I think it could be better. The back is quite basic. The overall shape of the ship is quite basic, but it does what it needs to do, and it show location of everything. FS, bro, yeah, that would be crazy. It's a good idea. Chilistrumpan. Worse to think about. Is it a space face? So that's for you. So you should get more or less a good direction to what to think about and what to push. Like I said, I wouldn't do it this like for some other one. I wouldn't do it this composition. I would just try to actually maybe I painted on top of yours already there. Yeah. So that's the original, and that's my attempt at bringing everything more towards the center and the point of the painting, the narrative. I still think, though, you couldn't push more about the colors in the painting. Space is a good way to try to push different kind of behavior in there. Maybe some sort of solar storm. I think from my memory, memory might fail me, but what's that old school movie, Armageddon? I think it's Armageddon, but they made space interesting as far as I remember. But anyways, keep pushing. I'll be right back. back. Yeah, Destiny 3 confirmed. Okay, so this is Ixis. I think the composition works really well. I think the colors work quite well, actually. The the everything kind of works well together. I think one thing which is lacking is that if we squint, it's a little bit hard to read the rhythm of things. Um, like the shadows part works well, right? So if we zoom out, we get that there's a mountain, there's a water, there's rocks, but then it falls a little bit short when we start looking closer, right? And I think one thing which is important is let me try to find the picture, which is the subtleties of things like that when it comes to edges and it comes to light. Um, um, is that what's important is the big picture um, parts. Now we get the whole painting, but then when we take that second pass and looking at everything a little bit closer, it's starting to not make too much sense as a picture, you know. So I found this painting, not painting, photo. Um, so it's very much like yours. You know, it's daylight. There's not a lot of shadow, etc. But the difference is looking at the rock here, the intensity of the light on top versus the intensity of the light on the sides is very clear, even though looking at it, it's very busy, right? So if we would do, let's say, a threshold pass, I know that this is the perfect like breakdown of how it works, but it's a good indicator of how the values read because it cuts them off in a certain point, right? So we can clearly see that there is a separation in the values because of the relationship between them, right? So if we would do the same here, um, a lot of it is lost and there's no clear, very clear separation between the shapes. So what I suggest is that you have to choose more, uh, create a stronger rhythm in your painting of what should be in focus and what can easily be hidden more. So by for example having a shadow on the hill on the grass to help separate masses a little bit more, while all the time, of course, trying to keep the lighting scenario, like where the direction of the light is coming from, etc., in mind. Uh, and also play with intensity of the hue. You can help play with without changing the value. You can still create more focal points by upping the saturation at certain places to help with vibrancy and focal point. Hey Helix, have a nice one. Thanks for swinging by. I must say I really like the palette. I really like the painting. It's a very nice, good mood in it. Um, the wind dragon doesn't read as well. It becomes very two-dimensional and very too iconic, like too much like an icon. Uh, you should think about it better, more in 3D space and how it interacts with the woman with the head. Now we're seeing it the head from the top, and it flattens everything quite drastically. So by just grouping everything roughly, should start showing uh, what you could do um, to take it, that next step. The dragon, hopefully you have on a separate layer. I think it definitely don't try to save it. Just repaint the whole pose and everything. And try again. You're the coolness. So, like I said, it's the pose of the dragon, right? Should be looking at the woman more. Should be probably more in perspective. And just by breaking it down, you can get the basic volumes right. The direction of the head and so on. Without it, and it just becomes this strange flatness. But I must say the fog on the hill is a nice touch. I'm assuming maybe some sort of folklore about where rolling fog comes from. Yeah, so the risk, another thing also, like you see me sample a lot from the painting, and when you're painting on something, there's always this risk of oversampling, that you're making all the colors dirty because you're sampling the same, and Photoshop doesn't calculate to up intensity and saturation as a painter would like. When we're sampling, it's just a binary calculation. you know, like 1 to 100, we have 75% opacity, then there's 25% to sample from in between, right? So it becomes this algorithm rather than an artistic decision. So when we get when we're sampling and potentially oversampling, that's when you gotta make sure that you go and select the original color and not the sampled color, because otherwise there's not the clarity and power of the colors there anymore. It just becomes this gray mush. So try to bring the focal point in a little bit better by grouping a lot of the hill together. Work on the palette, put in some accents here and there, or yeah, accents, like by boosting saturation to help the eye like flow through the painting. I think you're onto some very nice painting. I really like the composition. I like the start of the rhythm of all the colors. I mean, it works well as is, but it can be better. So by here you can clearly see, hopefully on the width stream window, what you gotta start thinking about to help it push it further. I didn't want to touch the palette too much. You know, it's quite nice when it comes to the palette. So there's 3 left. I gotta go get something to water. I forgot to get it. So this is Kylstrand. Okay, I'm back. Good night, Captain Bowles. Okay, so with this one, and the Kylstrumpan and Kylstrand. Oh, you bought the extra satchel. That's cool. Anyway, so there's a mistake which a lot of people do when they want to make something descriptive, is that they choose a safe perspective. So I think this is the indicator again, like some other people have done paint overs over, is that it becomes very linear, it becomes very explanatory, and it doesn't become dramatic because it's very safe, like the perspective and so on. and the way it's cropped. I mean, there's nothing wrong with seeing from the side. A lot of movies do that, but it's a matter of like how is the placement of everything. I think in this one it's not that bad, but I think it could have been a little bit more interesting. Um, just for example, imagine this scene seen from the side. You know, he wouldn't feel that small, right? He's kneeling there all alone, and in a way, you know, it works. But a lot of scenes, if for example in this movie, um, you know, the interaction here, right? He is looking at her. She's not. She's kind of dying. Spoilers. Uh, and we can see the perspective, but the perspective is, you know, there's lots of interesting shapes overlapping. Uh, there's always a point of choosing the camera, right? Like here we can see the masses; they're huge, but from this angle we just see a wall of warriors, right? Like riding into that makes it feel like, all right, it's very dense, right? Bunch of butts. Um, Same goes with this scene, right? It's very tight because it's personal. He's gonna be executed. Oh, spoilers. And you know, we were not seeing him straight from the side. We're not seeing him. Our eye level is underneath him. We're looking up at him, right? Um, yeah, very nice masks. Um, so, looking at your painting, you should start thinking about the the decisions you're making, um, why she we see her from this angle in this way, right? So one way to think about it is, all right, so we are at the level of her eyes, right? We are not above her or below her. We are a part of her because we're at that level, right? Clearly we've you made that decision, and when we're observing it, we are there. You know, so maybe you could make the bushes bigger, having them overlap, you know, so we don't see it so clearly. Now we are hiding in the bushes, right? Observing her having this beautiful moment. You know, we could even, you know, maybe have a hand pushing the bushes to the side. You know, maybe that becomes another part of the story. You know, like who's observing her while she's having her calm moment, right? One thing with her legs also, they're too short. And also the pose feels very arranged, very squared, like her shoulders with her knees, with her feet, with her hands. It's all very basic. I mean, if you would sit for a long time and fish, you would lean, you would try to offset your pose or posture so that different muscle groups are being used. Sorry. And if you're just sitting like perfectly squared up, everything is gonna perfectly suck when it comes to sitting on your ass, feet. You know, that's why a lot of people shift. They put the leg up, they adjust. It becomes more alive, right? So by having her in this way, I think you're defeating the purpose a bit. So by I would try to offset the pose a bit more, or maybe have her leg more like that. Maybe a fishing bag, so on. Yeah, it shows that you struggled, but that's fine. We all struggle. So one thing I would do is also have more interesting pools of light, where you have the opportunity to play with color and make a lot more saturation at places. The last thing you want to do, I think you're using saturation really well, but there's always this tendency of going to recipe based. And by that I mean like something is working and you're doing the same thing over and over too many times, and the painting itself doesn't have that dynamic brush marks or palette anymore, because something has worked, you've applied it across the painting, and then you're losing the contrast of, let's say, the asymmetrical balance of where the color accents are. If we would go through the whole painting and putting in color accents everywhere, we would need an additional layer of color accents in order for the painting to make sense. If everything has a color accent on it, and then the color accent doesn't become a color accent, right? It becomes a part of the whole painting and loses the power an accent has. One thing also, like I mentioned to the other people, is the lighting condition. Like if something is further behind, don't be scared of indicating that. And if something is being lit, go ahead, like put some pools of light in and so on. But I think all in all, it's a very nice painting, good colors. The light is a bit odd, these beams of light coming in. I get what you want, and it's a good thing. Just keep in mind to keep it not so organized and perfect. It's a common problem a lot of people have when everything is just so balanced. So try to have a narrative, try to have a point, to sell the idea, of someone fishing. Maybe, is she beautiful? Is she ugly? What's the reason for her to sit there really? Um, there's many layers to it that you potentially can do. But all in all, it's a really good use of colors. Quite, from my memory, Mulan, that Genghis Khan Disney movie. Yeah, or if the hand holds a dagger. And so my pose decision is just one way of many, and not necessarily, the best one. It's just a suggestion. And it's the same also, children, like your painting with gender swap. About brush marks and so on. So here's a Hafez. I think it's a pretty cool one. Beautiful moment between two warriors. Um, I think it's a cool one. The composition is interesting. It's different. It forces us to look in a specific way. Um, the overall colors and so on, they read pretty okay. This night, I think the intensity of his colors and the way he rendered the shadows, they feel very binary in the sense it's on and off, rather than it as a samurai. It looks more like you had reference in the sense of how you applied the painting on the arms, etc. Versus the knight, he feels very like you struggled. Doesn't feel right, you know. Much like the samurai feels way more correct because how the volume sits and how the parts are shaded. Man, I'm tired. I would love I could easily just fall asleep. I'll try to muscle through this. Uh, yeah, so the knight has a lots of volume issues. It's very like a lot of parts are breaking the perspective in the way how they sit inside the body. I think the clouds obviously could use some more work. You could, much like Georg's painting, you could try to give them a little bit more personality. Possibly rim light to help sell how they where they stand and so on. Also, if it's a sunset. Yoshimitsu, yeah. Yeah, the sky reflection in the samurai is great. And in the night, it's very basic and binary in that sense. Samurai is a lot more clearer, and the way you rendered the metal in the night, uh, it shows a little bit of lack of understanding and reflections and how you should paint metal. So what I would suggest is keep pushing the materials. I really like the samurai, like I mentioned, reads really well. Make sure to put in accents and in the sense of like I mentioned for was it say art, to put it in these accents in the light to make the behavior more dynamic and engaging. This night means a lot of work. You need to look at reference. It just doesn't work at all when it comes to the light and anatomy. It's very stiff. But it's a good start. Yeah, the posing of the knight isn't great. I think he used ref for the samurai and the knight maybe as well, but it was probably a standing suit rather than a human in it. Let's see. Arms, arms, arms. Fantastic Mr. Arms. Okay. I think this is a really cool painting, Arms. I think you really manage to control your palette this time around. I think Arms really nailed it. I think there's definitely a sense of beauty. That being said, dun, 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 I think there's still rooms of improvement. There's certain issues with this painting, which annoys me, and it is the framing of the painting. This object on the left, object on the right. I get it that like one thing could be like he's exiting the city, going into the beauty of the countryside, or so on. But the problem is that both are neutrally lit and both are just framing the painting without really having a reason to be there, right? So one way to do that is if we look at what's his name. Let's go to ArtStation. Hopefully I will find him. Come on. Don't be like this, ArtStation. What's his name? Is that all? Nico Ponim. All right. Should be him then, or his friend. Maybe it is him. Let me see. Let me see. Yeah, right. So one thing this guy does really well, is using diagonals and pockets of light as a compositional tool to help the eye flow through. And one thing that you can look at, like, it's this pockets of saturation and bleed, right? Blooming of the light. So one thing I wanted to say is, like, one way to solve this issue, to make it more interesting to look at, is, let's say, having a asymmetrical light in the painting, so that you could have, like, the building being hit by light, um, creating a diagonal, helping the scene read more, or, having some some different light to help alleviate the framing of the painting, because it becomes very binary. Secondly, there's a tangent, like, around the head. Um, I would try to now he got the hat. I would try to probably remove it, or if it's important, maybe you can move it. You move a part over here, so that it doesn't become a part of the character when it's almost touching, or stuff like that. I think the red here goes a little bit too dark. Yeah, but I think, like, asymmetrical light on the buildings are very important, and the same goes for these light posts and the textures. It's good to have textures. It's good to have material definitions, but if it's too much work done where it doesn't need to be worked on, it just becomes dead weight, right? So going back to him, like, one of the beauties of these paintings is that, like, the simplicity of it is the strength is in the complexity of how he painted it, not complexity of the scene, right? So a lot of why this works really well is because there's a lot of suggested parts, and there's also a lot of parts with definition. So looking back at yours, like, a lot of these poles are, like, perfectly rendered details across the board. Maybe it's better if everything isn't so perfect, right? And by doing that, you can hide parts, have a cast shadow being thrown over, try your hand at giving it a little bit more spice, like, in its behavior, right? Um, I think your painting itself is really nice. Just a floating guy there, right? But he also has a little bit of that problem where he's floating and barely touching the building. He's, like, standing next to that. Annoys me. I don't know, I'm testing here. Yeah, I think it's better for him to overlap. But overall, the lighting works, the composition works. I would suggest you, much like suggestion to the other people, having small parts of accent here and there to help boost the saturation and behavior of the water and so on. But a very cool painting from you, Holmes. Very happy. Um, you could also try even stronger colors. Strong colors are fine as long as they are harmonized, you know. It's when they're not harmonized it becomes a problem. Yeah, there's tangents there. Tangent tone. But overall, love the palette. You really managed to do something interesting. So bravo, bravo. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. You could try having more layers of these spaceships. Help have a diagonal momentum. This dark line of clouds I don't really get. Maybe there's some story point to them. But yeah, overall, really nice job. Um, I would like try to think about having strong colors that are united. Like Piotr Jablonski does that really well. Like it's a warm palette. He has really saturated colors here and there, but not saturation across the board because you need that vibrancy. And I think you're starting to get that really, really well. And I think in a way to enhance that is to go back in, let's say with color touch or something, and really push the saturations and accents. So that's your version. Um, as is pretty okay. I think it can be better. And here's my suggested changes just to help boost with color, help with diagonal, help with some tangents, and all in all, just some more attention. Serenity Paints. Join the Discord and join the 2 week challenge, and you'll have your own paint over in 2 weeks. Um, the new paint over session will topic will be posted today or tomorrow morning, and yeah, thanks everyone for joining in on the 2 week challenge to paint something beautiful. It was really fun. Unfortunately, I'm a bit tired, but hopefully it wasn't too bad. I'm just waiting to go to bed. Uh, here's my entry. My beautiful wifey. She needs more mustache, obviously. Tangents. Serenity paints. Well, you're not getting two, 3 sentences now. This stream ends. Please do join the Discord though. Post there. There's a bunch of people always helping out, and I give feedback now and then when I have time. So if you want some feedback from cool people, join the Discord. Um, so have a good one, everyone. Sleep tight. Have a good day. See you tomorrow morning for 30-minute warm-up. 9:10 as per usual. Alright. Have a good one, everyone. Outro time. I need a new outro. Bye.